Let's try something together, they said, addressing the class. I want you to imagine the topic we're learning as something you use every day. Something simple. Don't think of it as a lesson for a moment. Think of it as something practical. A few students leaned forward. A couple exchanged curious looks. The trainee continued, their voice gentle but clear. Now, I want each of you to think of the first thing that comes to your mind when I say process. It could be anything. Making tea. Fixing a bike. Even tying your shoelaces. Just hold that image in your mind. The room grew strangely quiet. Even the students who usually didn't participate looked thoughtful. All right, the trainee said. Who wants to tell me the process they thought of? One student raised their hand. I thought about making tea. Perfect, the trainee said warmly. Can you tell us the first step? Boil water, the student replied. Exactly. Now what's next? Add tea leaves, another student added. Soon the class began speaking freely again. The trainee turned the simple example into a bridge between an everyday habit and the topic they were learning. The teacher watched, amazed. He realized the trainee wasn't just explaining the lesson, they were bringing the lesson into the student's world. The trainee broke the concept down into clear steps, connecting each one to something familiar. Every time a student answered, they built on it without making anyone feel wrong. Good point, they would say. That's helpful. Let's look at that further. Interesting thought. Can we add something to it? The teacher observed how carefully the trainee guided the discussion, ever rushing. It's never overwhelming, always encouraging. Slowly, the class came alive again. Students who had been disengaged now leaned forward. Some raised their hands eagerly. Others nodded along as the idea became clearer. The teacher felt a mixture of relief and admiration. It wasn't jealousy anymore, it was understanding. He wasn't losing control of his classroom. He was gaining a different perspective. He stepped closer, listening to every word the trainee said. And for the first time today, he wasn't watching them as someone who might overshadow him. He was watching them as someone he could learn from. When the explanation finally ended, the trainee stepped back and said to the class, "You did the hard part. I only helped guide your thoughts." A few students clapped quietly. Others smiled with genuine understanding. The teacher walked forward, placing a gentle hand on the desk. "Thank you," he said to the class. "And thank you," he added, looking at the trainee. The trainee nodded politely and stepped aside. Again, the remainder of the lesson flowed more smoothly. The teacher asked a few more questions. The students responded, and the atmosphere stayed light and engaged. When the bell rang, the students packed their bags with cheerful energy. A few stopped near the trainee on their way out. That explanation helped a lot. Thanks. I understood it this time. The trainee responded with simple smiles and nods, not drawing attention to themselves. When the last student left, the teacher leaned against the desk and let out a slow breath. "Do you really have a gift?" he said quietly. The trainee shook their head. "Not a gift. Just practice and patience." He looked at them with curiosity. "Where did you learn to teach like that?" The trainee thought for a moment. "From watching my own teachers, the ones who didn't talk at me, but talked with me. The ones who made me feel like my thoughts mattered. I just try to do the same." The teacher felt something shift inside him, again a gentle realization. He sat down on the edge of the desk. "I tried so hard today to impress everyone. I wanted the class to see how much effort I put into the lesson. I wanted everything to go exactly as I planned, but maybe I was focusing too much on performance and not enough on connection." The trainee didn't rush to respond. They simply listened. After a moment, they said softly, "It's natural to want to impress people. It means you care. But sometimes, when we try too hard to make something special, we forget the simplest truth, that students only need someone who listens and understands how they think." The teacher nodded slowly. "You're right. I think today taught me more than I expected." The trainee smiled lightly. "Every day teaches us something new, even the days that don't go as planned. Especially those days." The teacher looked around the room, then back at the trainee. "Would you like to help with the next class too?" he asked. The trainee's eyes softened. "If you'd like me to." but only if I support your lesson, not replace it. This is your classroom. He appreciated the thoughtfulness. No, he said gently. This classroom belongs to the students. And today, I think they benefited from both of us. The trainee smiled, appreciative of the sentiment. The teacher stood up, feeling lighter than before. The unexpected moments of the day had shifted his perspective, teaching him something he hadn't realized he needed. Tomorrow would be another day, another class, another chance to try again. But today wasn't about being impressive. Today was about understanding. Today was about growth, and he knew now that the lesson he learned was one he would carry forward for a very long time. He stood near the window for a moment after the class ended, watching the students leave with excited faces. Their voices filled the hallway as they talked about the activity they had just experienced. And even though he had taught for years, it felt like this was the first time he was seeing something new happen in his own classroom. He took a slow breath, letting the moment settle inside him. It had been a long day, but the kind that stayed with a person for a long time. The kind that changed something quietly, without asking for permission. He turned and looked at the trainee teacher, who was still gathering the small things she had used in her demonstration. She moved gently, almost carefully, as if she didn't want to disturb the energy of the room. He noticed that she seemed lost in her own thoughts, unsure whether she should walk over and say something or simply leave quietly. She looked nervous again, not at all like the same person who had just brought the entire class to life with one simple idea. He walked toward her slowly, trying not to make her feel pressured. When she finally looked up, he saw the uncertainty in her eyes. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to speak first, maybe to apologize or explain herself, but he shook his head lightly. "You did well," he said quietly, almost as if the walls might overhear him. "The students really connected with you. I haven't seen them that focused in a while." She blinked, surprised. "I hope I didn't step over anything. I just felt like they needed something different for a moment." "They did," he replied, "and I'm glad you stepped in." She looked down, relieved, but still unsure how much credit she deserved. She wasn't the kind of person who tried to shine or take attention. Everything she did came from a place of wanting to help, not from wanting to impress anyone. He walked back to his desk and sat down for a moment, feeling his shoulders relax for the first time since the morning. He had worked hard on the lesson he had prepared. He had imagined it playing out perfectly, every student listening carefully, every detail unfolding exactly the way he pictured it. But teaching rarely worked like that. Classrooms were unpredictable, alive, full of different moods and needs. He realized now how tightly he had been holding on to the idea of wanting to impress the students. Maybe he just wanted them to see him as someone worth paying attention to. Maybe he wanted to be the teacher they remembered long after they left the school. But today showed him something he had forgotten. Teaching was not about showing how much he knew. It was about helping the students understand in a way that felt real and natural to them. And sometimes that meant letting someone else take the lead. The trainee teacher finally walked over, holding her notebook close to her chest. "I'm still learning," she said quietly. "I don't always know if what I'm doing is right. I just try things that would have helped me when I was a student." He nodded with a small smile. "And that's exactly why you connected with them. You didn't try to impress them. You tried to reach them." She took in his words slowly, as if storing them carefully in her mind. Her shoulders relaxed a little. The room felt warmer now, not in temperature, but in spirit. After a moment, she asked, "Did you always know what kind of teaching style you wanted?" He leaned back slightly, thinking about it. "I don't think anyone ever fully knows. You learn as you go. You learn from the people around you. You learn from your students. Some days you feel like you have everything figured out. And other days you realize you're still trying to understand the basics. That's what makes teaching real. It's always moving, always changing." She listened closely, holding on to every word. She admired how calmly he spoke now, compared to earlier when he seemed eager and driven by expectations. She realized he wasn't just a teacher. He was someone who cared deeply about guiding others. Even if he occasionally stumbled along the way, a gentle silence filled the room, but it wasn't awkward. It felt like two people sharing the same understanding for the first time. He looked down at her notebook and asked, "Can I see what you planned?" She handed it over carefully. Inside were small sketches, simple diagrams, and short notes. They weren't perfect or fancy, but they were heartfelt. She had made these for the students, thinking about what would catch their attention and make them feel involved. As he flipped through the pages, recognized something he had almost forgotten: passion. In the early morning, the school hallways were filled with the soft sound of students talking and lockers closing. The day felt normal to most people, but for one teacher, it felt different. He had been planning something special for days. He wanted his students to see him not just as a teacher who gave lessons, but as someone who could inspire them and make them excited to learn. He had spent the whole week preparing a demonstration he believed would impress them. He imagined their surprised faces, their smiles, their excitement. That thought alone made him feel proud. He arrived in the classroom earlier than usual. The room was quiet, with sunlight coming in through the windows. He walked around, checking the materials he had set up. He adjusted a few things, organized the table, and made sure everything was in place. Then he stepped back and looked at the setup with satisfaction. Everything was ready. He took a deep breath, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. As the first bell rang, students began entering the room. They walked in chatting, but many of them stopped and looked around. They noticed the different setup and started whispering to each other. "Sir, what are we doing today?" One student asked with curiosity. He smiled but kept the surprise. "Just wait. You'll see. I've prepared something special for you." His tone made them even more curious. The students took their seats, still talking quietly to each other. Some tried to guess what the surprise was. Others simply waited, looking at the items he had arranged at the front of the room. The atmosphere was full of energy. It made him feel even more confident. He believed today would be a memorable day. He had always enjoyed teaching, but there were days when he felt the students didn't fully connect with the lessons. Some days they were tired or distracted. He wanted to change that. He wanted to show them something they would remember, something that made learning feel fun and real. That was why he had prepared this demonstration. He hoped it would spark their interest and show them how much potential they had. More students continued to enter until the classroom was almost full. A student in the front row leaned forward and said, "Sir, you've been talking about this surprise since Monday? We're really excited. Can we know now?" He laughed softly. "Not yet. But soon. Let everyone settle down first." Students nodded, some smiling, some tapping their desks impatiently. He felt their excitement grow, and it warmed his heart. It reminded him why he loved teaching. Seeing students eager to learn was one of the best parts of his job. When the final bell rang, signaling the official start of class, he clapped his hands gently to get everyone's attention. The room quieted down, though the energy was still there. "All right," he began. "Today's lesson is going to be a little different. I want you all to watch carefully, and I want you to be part of it. This is not just a lesson, it's an experience." The students leaned forward, their eyes fixed on him. He picked up the first item from the table. It was something simple but important for the demonstration. He looked at the class again. "Before I start, I want to tell you something. Sometimes learning feels boring because we hear the same things again and again. But learning can be exciting. It can be something that makes you think, something that stays with you. And that's what I want for all of you today." As he spoke, the students listened quietly. His words were calm but full of emotion. He was not just trying to impress them. He was genuinely trying to make them feel the importance of the lesson. But even as he felt confident, a small thought crossed his mind. What if the demonstration didn't go as planned? What if the students didn't react the way he hoped? What if something unexpected happened? He shook the thought away. He had prepared well. Everything would be fine. He started explaining the first step of the demonstration. His voice was steady, and his gestures were clear. The students followed with interest. Some nodded, some whispered quietly to their friends. But all of them were paying attention. The teacher walked around the room as he spoke, making sure every student could see what he was doing. He enjoyed moving around, rather than staying in one place. It helped him feel connected to the class. He noticed that some students were smiling, while others had a focused expression that made him feel proud. He continued with the demonstration, adding more steps. He explained everything slowly, making sure the students understood. He kept checking their faces to see if they were following along. After a few minutes, the room was silent except for his voice. The students were completely focused. He felt happy. This was exactly what he had hoped for an engaged, curious class. But what he didn't know was that a change was coming, something he had not planned for. A small moment that would shift the whole day. But for now, he remained confident, unaware of what was waiting ahead. As he continued, he could see the students getting more excited. A few raised their hands with questions. He answered each one patiently. He wanted them to feel comfortable and open. The demonstration felt like it was going perfectly. He added a personal story to make the lesson more relatable. He talked about how he had first learned this technique years ago, how it had helped him understand the topic better. The students listened with interest. They liked hearing real-life stories. The teacher noticed that even the students, who usually stayed quiet, were paying attention today. This made him even more determined to give them a great experience. He wanted every student to leave the classroom feeling inspired. Time passed, and the demonstration moved into the final steps. The students watched closely as he wrapped up the main part of the activity. He looked at them and smiled. See, learning doesn't always have to be dull. When you approach it the right way, it becomes something enjoyable. The students nodded. Some clapped softly. Others whispered excitedly. He felt a wave of satisfaction wash over him. The lesson was going exactly the way he wanted. At that moment, the classroom door opened quietly. He didn't notice it right away. His focus was entirely on the final part of the demonstration. The students noticed someone enter, but they stayed quiet. A person stepped inside and stood near the back of the classroom. But the teacher was too involved in his lesson to see. He was explaining the last step, adding final touches, and waiting for the students' reactions. He felt proud. He felt like he had done something meaningful. He felt like today had succeeded in making learning exciting. But as the person in the back continued observing, the day's story was slowly shifting in a direction he had not expected. And that shift would soon take him by surprise, changing the day in a way he could never have imagined. For now, though, he stood at the front of the classroom with confidence shining through him, believing he had given his students something memorable. Unaware that the real surprise of the day was still waiting to unfold, the classroom was still buzzing with quiet excitement after the teacher finished his demonstration. The students whispered to each other about what they had just seen. Some looked impressed, others were smiling, and a few were still trying to understand every step he had shown. The teacher felt proud as he looked at them. For him, this moment felt like a small victory. He had worked hard, and seeing their excitement made him feel like it was all worth it. But as he placed the materials back on the table, he finally noticed someone standing near the back of the room. He paused, confused for a moment. The person looked young, maybe in their mid-20s, holding a small notebook in their hands. They stood quietly, watching the class, with a polite smile. The teacher blinked in surprise. He had completely forgotten that the school was expecting a trainee teacher to visit this week. The administration had mentioned it briefly. But with all his planning for the demonstration, the thought had slipped his mind. He straightened himself and nodded at the visitor. "Oh, hello. I didn't see you come in. You must be the one joining us today." The trainee gave a small smile and stepped forward. "Yes, I hope it's all right that I came in quietly. I didn't want to interrupt." Her voice was soft and calm, with a tone that instantly made the students curious. A few of them turned in their seats to look more closely. The teacher nodded politely. "Of course. Please feel free to observe. We just finished a part of our lesson." The trainee stepped to the side and observed the classroom with gentle eyes. They didn't seem nervous, but there was a softness in their posture, like someone who didn't want to cause any disturbance. They held their notebook close, as if ready to write something down at any moment. The teacher turned back to the class. "All right, let's continue. We still have some time left. Who wants to share what they understood so far?" Hands shot up around the room. The students were eager to talk, eager to show they were paying attention. The teacher walked among them, giving each one a chance to speak. While they spoke, the trainee listened quietly, occasionally writing something in the notebook. The teacher felt proud of how active the class was. It made him feel like his efforts were being recognized. But at the same time, he couldn't help wondering what the trainee thought of his teaching. Were they impressed? Were they just observing? He wasn't sure, but he hoped they saw how much energy he put into making the class lively. After a few students shared their thoughts, the teacher continued explaining the topic. But as the minutes passed, he noticed something he hadn't expected. The students who were excited at first began to slowly lose their energy. A few leaned back in their chairs. Some became quiet. Others glanced at the clock. This wasn't unusual. Students often lost focus after the first burst of excitement. Still, it made him feel slightly uneasy. He had hoped today would be different. He wanted them to stay engaged from start to finish. He looked at the trainee again, wondering what they were noticing. They stood calmly, watching every moment. They didn't seem critical, just observant, trying to keep the energy high. The teacher cracked a small joke. Few students laughed politely. But the spark from earlier wasn't fully there anymore. He continued teaching, but he could feel the shift in the room. The earlier excitement was fading. The students weren't bored, but they weren't as lively either. The teacher tried another example, speaking with more passion, using gestures, walking around. But the class responded only lightly, kept going, not wanting the lesson to lose its charm. As he wrapped up another explanation, he suddenly heard a soft voice from the back. "May I try something?" the trainee asked gently. The teacher paused. He looked back at them, surprised. He had expected the trainee to stay silent the entire time and only observe. He didn't expect them to speak up. "Try something," he repeated. The trainee nodded slowly. "If it's all right, I've been watching your class. They seem like a group that enjoys hands-on learning. Maybe I could show them a small technique. It might help them understand the topic more clearly." The teacher hesitated for a second. He had planned the entire lesson from start to finish. He wanted today to be the day he impressed his students. Letting someone else step in, especially a trainee, felt unexpected. But at the same time, he didn't want to appear rude or overly controlling. He also didn't want the students to think he wasn't open to new ideas. He gave a polite smile. "Sure, go ahead. I'd like to see what you have in mind." The trainee stepped closer to the front of the room. They didn't look nervous. Instead, they looked calm and thoughtful. They placed their notebook on the teacher's desk, took a moment to look at the students, and then asked a simple question. "Before we continue, can someone tell me what part of the lesson confused you the most?" the trainee asked. The question was gentle but direct. The students looked surprised. No teacher had ever asked them that so openly before. Shh. For a moment, the room was silent. Then one student raised their hand. "I understood most of it, but the last step confused me a little." Another added, "Yeah, same here. I didn't fully get how everything connects." The trainee nodded. "Thank you for being honest. Let's explore it together. I promise it will make sense in a simple way." They walked to the board and drew a quick sketch, not too detailed, not too messy, just clear enough to show the idea. Then they turned to the class. "Imagine this is something you use every day," they said, pointing at the drawing. "Think about how you would explain it to a friend who has never seen it before. What would you say first?" The students looked at each other, a bit surprised by the question. But slowly, one student raised their hand and gave an answer. The trainee smiled warmly. "Exactly. That's a great start. Now, what would you say next?" Another student answered, then another. Soon the class was fully engaged again, not because the trainee did something big or dramatic, but because their method made the students feel involved. The teacher watched from the side, a little stunned. The shift in the room was immediate. The energy had returned. Students who were quiet before were now participating. The trainee wasn't doing anything flashy. They were simply guiding the students gently, making them think for themselves. The trainee continued, building on each student's answer. They used simple examples, small comparisons, everyday objects. The students listened carefully, nodding along. The teacher felt a mix of emotions. On one hand, he was impressed. The trainee's technique was smooth and natural. On the other hand, he felt something tug inside him, something close to embarrassment. He had spent days preparing a big, impressive demonstration. But the trainee had walked in, asked a simple question, and instantly captured the class's attention. Still, he pushed that feeling aside. It wasn't about competition. It was about helping the students learn. And right now, they were clearly learning. The trainee finished the explanation and looked at the class. Does it make more sense now? The students nodded enthusiastically. Some even said, yes, definitely, and now I get it. The trainee smiled warmly again. Good learning becomes easier when we break things down and look at them from our own point of view. You're all doing great. The teacher stepped forward, clapping lightly. Thank you for that. That was very helpful. The trainee nodded politely. Thank you for letting me try. Your class is wonderful. They're very smart and open. The teacher felt his chest tighten a little. He wasn't jealous, but he couldn't ignore the impact the trainee had made in such a short time. The bell rang softly in the hallway, signaling the end of the period. The students gathered their things, talking excitedly about how the trainee had made the lesson easier to understand. Some even thanked the trainee before leaving. The teacher remained standing at the front of the classroom, thoughtful. The trainee picked up their notebook and approached him. Thank you again, they said politely. I didn't want to interrupt. I just thought it might help. The teacher shook his head. No, you didn't interrupt. You added something valuable. But inside he wondered what this meant for the rest of the day. He had planned everything so carefully. He wanted to impress his students, to make them remember this lesson. But now something unexpected had happened. Something that would stay with him far longer than he realized. And this was only the beginning. The hallway outside the classroom grew quieter as the students left. But inside the room, a strange silence settled between the teacher and the trainee. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence, but it wasn't exactly easy either. The teacher stood near his desk, thinking about how the lesson had gone. While the trainee stood near the board, gently closing their notebook, the teacher looked at the table where his demonstration materials still sat. A part of him still felt proud of what he had done, but another part felt something else, something he couldn't fully name yet. Maybe it was surprise, maybe curiosity, maybe a little confusion. Whatever it was, the feeling stayed with him as he looked around the room. He tried to shake it off as he began cleaning up the materials. The trainee, noticing he was still working, stepped forward quietly. Do you need help? They asked softly. He looked up and forced a smile. No, it's all right, I've got it. They nodded and stepped back, not wanting to get in his way. But even from a distance, they seemed thoughtful, as if they were reading the room and noticing every small detail. After a moment, the teacher spoke again. Your technique. It worked really well. The students connected with it right away. The trainee smiled politely. Thank you. I just tried something simple. They're a very responsive group. He nodded. Though inside he wondered how something so simple had worked so effectively. He had planned an entire demonstration while the trainee had walked in, asked 2 or 3 questions, and somehow brought the energy back into the room. The bell rang again, signaling a short break before the next class. The teacher finished, clearing the table, took a sip of water, and sat down briefly. He felt strangely tired, not in a physical way, but mentally. The morning had taken an unexpected turn. The trainee approached the window and opened it slightly, letting fresh air into the room. The soft breeze made the curtains sway. They looked around the classroom with a gentle expression. You have a great environment here, they said. The students feel comfortable. That's important. He appreciated the comment, though he wasn't sure why it made him feel uneasy. Maybe because he had wanted to impress the trainee just as much as he wanted to impress the students, even if he hadn't admitted it to himself. Thank you, he replied. I try to make it a place where they feel safe to speak. It's not always perfect, but I do my best. The trainee nodded and walked a little closer. That's all anyone can do. Teaching isn't about perfection, it's about connection. The teacher looked at them, curious. Did someone tell you that? My mentor used to say it, the trainee replied. They always believe that a class responds more to someone who makes them feel understood, rather than someone who tries to impress them. The teacher felt the words settle in his mind like a quiet echo. Maybe that was why the trainee's method had worked so well. They weren't trying to be impressive. They were trying to make the students feel seen before he could think more about it. The sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway. The next group of students began arriving. They entered with cheerful energy, talking to each other, unaware of the quiet tension in the room. The teacher stood up and straightened his posture. He wanted to start fresh, with confidence. He welcomed the students as they took their seats. The trainee stood to the side again, observing quietly. The class began as usual. The teacher explained the topic, wrote on the board and asked questions. But as the minutes passed, something familiar happened. The excitement from the beginning slowly faded. Students started shifting in their seats. A few leaned back. Some played with their pens. A couple glanced at the clock. The teacher felt that same sinking feeling he had felt earlier. He tried to bring back their attention with another story, then a quick example. But the spark wasn't fully returning. He could feel the trainee watching, not judgmentally, but attentively. He felt pressure building inside him. He wanted to prove that he could keep the class engaged, that he was capable, but the room's energy continued slipping. Finally, he paused. He didn't know what else to try. Then he heard the trainee's voice again, soft but clear. "May I ask them something?" He turned to them. They weren't smiling to show confidence. They weren't trying to take over. They simply looked concerned for the students. After a brief hesitation, the teacher nodded. "Go ahead." The trainee stepped forward and gently leaned on the desk, making themselves closer to the students' level instead of standing over them. The students looked up, curious once again. "I want to ask you something simple," the trainee began. "What's the hardest part of today's topic so far?" A few students shrugged. One raised their hand halfway, unsure if they wanted to speak. Another replied quietly, "I don't know. Maybe the middle part." The trainee nodded as if they expected that answer. "All right, then let's try something different. Instead of me explaining it, how about we explore it together, like a puzzle?" The students exchanged surprised looks. One of them leaned forward. "A puzzle?" "Yes," the trainee said warmly. "Something we break into smaller pieces, so each piece makes sense." They drew a simple circle on the board, then divided it into 3 sections with 2 lines. "Imagine your topic is like this circle," they explained. "If you look at the whole thing at once, it feels confusing. But if you look at one slice at a time, it becomes easier." "Now let's start with the first slice. Who wants to take a guess about what it represents?" The room fell quiet for 3 seconds, and then a student raised their hand. Another joined, then 2 more. Soon the class was speaking openly again. They weren't just listening, they were engaging, thinking, participating. The teacher watched in quiet awe. The trainee continued using simple visuals and gentle questions. The students gave answers freely, even if some were unsure. The trainee encouraged each one with patience. "That's a good thought," they would say. "Let's build on that." Or, "I see where you're going. Let's explore it." Every response felt warm, encouraging, and non-judgmental. The students could feel it, and so could the teacher. Slowly, the concept that had seemed difficult now became clear. The students nodded as things clicked in their minds. The teacher stood at the side of the room, watching the scene. At one point, he crossed his arms, then uncrossed them. He didn't know how to feel. He wasn't angry. He wasn't upset. But he was surprised, deeply surprised. He had spent years teaching, years improving his methods, years watching what worked and what didn't. Yet here was someone new, using a technique so gentle, so simple, and somehow making the lesson feel more alive. He listened carefully to how the trainee spoke, the calmness, the way they waited for answers instead of rushing, the way they guided instead of instructing. He realized something important in that quiet. Observation: the trainee wasn't trying to be impressive at all. They weren't trying to shine. They weren't trying to show they were better. They were simply trying to help the students understand. And that sincerity was what the students responded to. By the time the trainee finished the explanation, the class looked satisfied and confident. One student said, "Now it makes sense." Another added, "This was actually fun." The trainee smiled warmly. "I'm glad. Y'all did the work. I only guided you." The bell rang, and the students gathered their things, leaving the room buzzing with excitement. They waved at both teachers before stepping out. When the room finally emptied, The teacher walked slowly toward the trainee. "You have a very natural way of teaching," he said quietly. The trainee looked almost embarrassed. "I just try to understand what they need. Every class is different." He nodded. "I can see that." The trainee hesitated before speaking again. "You're very passionate. Your students respect you. That's clear." The teacher gave a small, tired laugh. "Respect is one thing, but connection, it's something else. You seem to build it so effortlessly." The trainee shook their head. "It's not effortless. I just try to listen more than I speak. Students notice when someone genuinely listens." Those words settled into the teacher's mind again. They were simple words, but they felt like a quiet lesson, one he hadn't expected to receive today. The teacher looked at the empty desks, then at the sunlight coming through the window. "I think I still have a lot to learn," he admitted softly. The trainee offered a gentle smile. "We're all still learning. Even the best teachers learn something new every day. That's what makes teaching beautiful." The teacher looked at them for a moment, trying to understand the ease in their tone, the calm confidence in their presence. Something inside him shifted slightly, not jealousy, not insecurity, but a sense of awakening. He wasn't losing anything today. In fact, he was gaining something as he cleaned up the front desk. He caught himself thinking about the next class, the next lesson. Maybe today wasn't going as he planned. Maybe he wasn't the only one impressing the students. But maybe this unexpected moment was exactly what he needed. He didn't know it yet, but the day was about to teach him more than he had prepared to teach others. The afternoon sun was softer now, stretching warm light across the classroom floor. The teacher stood near the desk, staring at the empty room as the trainee quietly arranged their notebook and a few sheets of paper. The break before the next class felt longer than usual, almost heavy with the thoughts he couldn't shake off. He knew he was supposed to prepare for the next group of students, but instead he found himself thinking about everything that had happened so far. He wasn't upset, not angry, not defeated, just thoughtful. It was strange how quickly the day had changed. He had started the morning with complete confidence, excitement, and a plan he believed would make the day memorable. And while his demonstration had impressed the students, the moments afterward had taken a different direction, one he hadn't expected. The trainee, in their gentle and calm way, had shifted the energy of the room without even trying. Every time they spoke, something inside him responded, something that made him rethink his own approach. He sat down at one of the desks, leaning back slightly. The trainee noticed and walked over, their expressions soft. "Are you all right?" they asked politely. He nodded. "Yes, just thinking. It's been an interesting day." The trainee smiled, not pushing further. Teaching days often are. One moment you're sure you know exactly what will happen, and the next moment everything takes a different shape. He looked at them more closely. "Does that happen to you often?" "More than you'd expect," they replied with a small laugh. Students can change the direction of a lesson without even realizing it. They're unpredictable in the best ways. The teacher nodded quietly. "You seem to handle it very naturally." The trainee lowered their gaze slightly, a humble gesture. "Not always. I just try to listen first. When I listen, I understand what they need. And once I understand that, everything becomes clearer." The teacher took a slow breath, kept hearing that word "listen," and every time it echoed inside him. Before he could respond, the sound of students approaching filled the hallway. A new crowd entered the classroom, laughing and joking as they found their seats. The teacher stood up, straightened his posture, and took a deep breath. He wanted to try. He wanted to do better this time. He wasn't trying to compete with the trainee. He was trying to learn from the experience. As the class settled, the trainee stepped aside again, ready to observe. The teacher started the lesson with calm confidence. He asked simple questions, tried to involve the students a bit more naturally, and encouraged them to speak. At first, things went smoothly. The students responded well, but after about 15 minutes, the familiar pattern appeared again. A few students became restless. Some leaned back, others doodled on their notebooks. The teacher felt the energy slipping. He tried adjusting his voice, giving examples, changing the rhythm of the lesson. But nothing fully brought the class back. He paused for a moment, then looked toward the trainee. They didn't move or speak. They simply observed, giving him space. They didn't want to take over. They wanted him to figure it out. The teacher appreciated that, but at the same time, he felt the pressure building inside him. The class was slipping again. Taking a breath, he tried a different approach. "All right," he said. "Let's look at this from a different angle." He picked up a textbook and flipped to a section he rarely used. But as he spoke, he could feel the students drifting further. His effort wasn't landing. Finally, a student raised their hand and asked a question completely unrelated to what he was saying. The teacher answered patiently, but the moment made it clear the connection wasn't strong. He stepped back slightly, unsure of what to do next. Then he heard the trainee's quiet voice again, barely more than a whisper. "Can I help support the idea you're trying to explain?" This time, there was no hesitation at all. Nodded. "Yes, please." The trainee walked forward, not with excitement, not with a sense of victory, but with calm respect. They stood beside the teacher, looked at the students, and smiled softly. "Not just for teaching, but for the process of learning itself. This is good," he said softly. "Really good," she smiled. Not a big smile, but one that held quiet pride. "Thank you. It means a lot coming from you." "It means a lot seeing it," he replied. The school hallway outside had mostly gone quiet now. Only a few distant voices echoed here and there. The afternoon sun had begun to fade. Casting a warm light across the classroom floor, he stood up and walked toward the door, then looked back at her. "You know, I think the students are going to remember today for a long time. Not because of what I planned, but because of what you shared with them. It was your class. I just added something small." Sometimes, he said, small things make the biggest difference. Her eyes softened, and she looked around the classroom one more time. She realized she had grown more today than she expected. She had walked in as someone unsure, hoping not to get in the way. But she was leaving knowing she had something valuable to give. They stepped out of the classroom together, walking down the quiet hallway. The lights hummed gently above them. The soft echo of their footsteps filled the space. As they reached the end of the hallway, he paused. "I know this might sound strange, but today taught me something too." She looked at him, curious. "What did it teach you?" He let out a gentle breath. "That teaching isn't about being the most impressive person in the room. It's about being open enough to learn from the people who walk into your life. Even if they're here for just a short time." She held his words carefully, knowing they weren't just spoken out of politeness. They came from a real place inside him. They walked outside where the cool air greeted them. Students were still scattered around the grounds, talking, laughing, and heading home. Both of them stood there for a moment, watching the simple scene. "You're going to be a great teacher," he said gently. She lowered her eyes for a second, touched by the sincerity in his voice. "I hope so. I really do." "You already are," he said. There was a quiet moment between them, one filled with respect, understanding, and growth. Then she nodded, thanked him again, and headed toward the gate. He stayed where he was for a moment longer, watching her leave. He felt lighter than he had in weeks. Something inside him had opened up a realization, a shift. The day had not gone the way he planned. He didn't end up impressing the students with the big lesson he had prepared. Instead, he witnessed something better, a moment of connection that reminded him why he had become a teacher in the first place. And as he finally walked toward his car, he carried a quiet smile with him, one that came from knowing that learning wasn't something that happened only in classrooms. It happened in moments like these, when two people learned from each other without even trying, and that was something worth remembering.